we are going to be celebrating The Wedding at Keestone. And this is a movie that was produced. Everything was filmed right here on site. And we are having a red carpet event. So ladies, you can dress up, come and get your picture taken on the red carpet and watch the movie. The tickets are $50, but that includes all of the food. We're going to have some wonderful food. And just come out and enjoy the evening with us. And I promise you will absolutely love the movie. It is so cute. It's just a wonderful romantic comedy, and you're going to just really love it. And then the following week, we have another exciting show. We all love the music of Journey. Who doesn't love that music? And we are actually having a tribute to their songbook, and it is done by the band called Resurrection. And they do an amazing job. So if you love the music of Journey, you do not want to miss that next Saturday evening. We have a lot of things coming up also that I want to tell you about. In Loretto, we do like a Oktoberfest, and we're doing a ladies' night out. And this is something that you really would enjoy. And so we all love the movie Wicked and the Broadway play. So we're going to be showing Wicked on this beautiful LED wall right behind me. And so if you have not seen that movie, you just have to come and see it with us. And I've seen it several times, but I'm going to watch it again. It's one of those movies you can watch over and over. But we're going to have the restaurant open that evening. We're going to have a special menu. And so I think you'll really enjoy that. We also have an upcoming show of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Everybody loves Frankie Valli, and that's one of the exciting things about the resort. We'd like to bring people together that enjoy life and enjoy celebrating things together and coming out and having a good time. So we would love to have you for that. And I want to tell you, tonight, I would love for you to purchase your tickets while you're here, and you can get $20 off of those tickets for our VIP section, which is this wonderful section right here on the very front. And this is where I like to sit when we have a concert, because you just feel such a part of the concert. So I promise, if you buy a ticket, if you've never been here for a concert, you've just got to come. And also the Eagles is going to be in November. Again, who doesn't love the Eagles? And so we're going to have a great time together, and we're going to wrap the year up with a tribute to the music of Alabama by Boys in the Band, and have a great big New Year's Eve celebration right here in the Stone Theater. So please mark your calendars, plan to attend. I'll be here all evening, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And you can do overnight accommodations. So when you come for any event, you can stay here on site, enjoy the amenities. The restaurant's opened every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for brunch. So just come and do a weekend getaway with us. We would love that. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Well, I guess I'll take this off and come out. So a couple of things I wanted to announce before we get started. First thing I wanted to announce, can everybody hear me? First thing I wanted to announce is as of 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, I have stepped down as chairman of the Republican Party. So if you didn't know, I wanted to bring that up to let you know I have stepped down as the chairman of the Republican Party in Lawrence County. We have a wonderful new chairman in Effie Carroll. Effie has agreed to take it. Yes, Effie has agreed to take it. And I'm greatly appreciative of Effie doing it. As of 5 o'clock or so this afternoon, I was reinstated back as vice chair. And the reason that I did that is as chairman, I'm not allowed to speak up, or I'm not allowed to speak out on primaries and when we have candidates that are running. As vice chair, I can do those things. And so it's not like I have left the party, but I have changed positions in order to be able to be more vocal, in order to make sure that Lawrence County is represented the best that we can represent. Just a couple of quick things too on that. I would like to have everybody, the reason I've done this, I'll give you the reason. We have a very important race in the Congressional 7th District. If you guys are not aware of that's going on, Mark Green, when he stepped down. And I have a good friend by the name of Jody Barrett. That is by far the best of these candidates that are running. The last day of voting, I believe, is going to be October the 7th. So we got less than a month away. And I felt like I had to get involved in that. I also felt like that I had to get involved in Gary Humble. Gary Humble's going to be running for Senate against Jack Johnson. Yes. And then finally, I've been working with Monty on his campaign, and he graciously asked, and with a lot of prayer and supplication, he had asked me to be his chief of staff. And you're clapping now, but we'll see. It's very humble. I had 3 requests on that, though, and I want everybody to know this. One, I had to have my family agree to it and be involved. And you guys that know my wife, she's not politics is not her thing, but she sees what I see, and I'm hoping you guys will see who we have in Monty Fritts. This is who we need for our state. And if we're not aware that our state's in trouble, then we're not really paying attention to what's going on. But Monty is that person to lead our state. And I felt it, and I am so glad for that. The second thing is I had to make sure that Scott Golden, with the chair of RNC for the Tennessee, was good for this. And Scott actually helped me and showed me what I needed to do and was very supportive of this. And then the third thing is I told Monty that if I'm going to do this, it would have to be on a volunteer basis, because me stepping down as chair, some people would say, oh, well, you took it for a job. And that's not the case. I took it because of the man that I believe in. And so it will be as a volunteer basis. And when he gets elected, if he chooses, then at that point we can talk about it then. But we need to get this man elected, and I'm so glad to see you guys here. So with that said, I want to introduce a real good friend of mine, Dave Vance. And Dave has been my mentor in politics. And I think the world of this man. He has done so much for this state, and a lot of people don't even realize what he has done. Not just being effective, but the amount of time and effort he's put in to making Tennessee better. Dave has a podcast called The Tennessee Informer. If you have not signed up, if you have not listened, you need to. When Dave wants to liven things up and maybe get in trouble a little bit, he'll have me on the show. So now I can also talk a little bit more than I could before. Dave is also ahead of this Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty, and Dave's going to be talking about this. And that's who is supporting and has brought up or has made this event so special. And then finally, I want to thank William Keelan of Keestone Resorts. William, I talked to William. We talked about looking at having it at another place due to expenses. And William donated this building to us to use. And yes, William and Keestone needs a round of applause, because we need business owners that have our same values and share our same values and will get in with us. And William's just a super, super individual. I'm so glad that he's part of what we're doing. So without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend, Dave Vance.
Thank you, Lawrence. I appreciate it. Once again, I'd like to thank William Keelan as well, and Drew Keelan, Katie Eagle, Andy Luck, Lawrence Sutton, and Laura Sutton. And I got to correct you on a couple things, Lawrence. This is probably the easiest event I've ever had to coordinate because I didn't have to do anything. Okay, I'm 3 hours from here, and Andy Luck, Katie Eagle, Laura Sutton, and other people here made this happen, and I really do appreciate you doing that. Couple of things here. Like I said, I'm from Stewart County. I'm former chair, current vice chair, so I can say a little more. And Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty. You know, when a lot of people, oh, by the way, this is the perfect day. This is Constitution Day. It's the perfect day to talk about this. Okay. Where's Andy Luck? We got Andy Luck in here. We also have another one of our county chapter leaders, Danny Blitz from White County. She's here. Appreciate her making that trip. She goes around the state and she gives the talks about this issue. I will be done in at least 3 hours, I promise. No. It'll only take about 15, 20 minutes for what I want to cover. Okay, so Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty. That word sovereignty scares a lot of people. So first off, understand this has nothing to do with sovereign citizens. We don't make our own license plates. We don't make our own driver's license, and we don't tell the cops that we don't have to do what they say, all right? That's not the case. So sovereignty, that's the right of a state to make laws within the boundaries of their state, to defend their state from invasions, and to maintain the security of their state. That's essentially what sovereignty is. And it's gotten a bad rap because people hear sovereign citizen and they don't understand it. So we have nothing to do with them. Now, sovereignty is not some old idea. You know, the Supreme Court has recognized our sovereignty. They've recognized it throughout. No, by the way, if you look at Article 7 in the Constitution, you look in the back, this is not a contract with, it was not an agreement with the federal government. This was the states creating the federal government. Okay, they created it. And we need to remember that. And they have throughout history and different times recognized our sovereignty. In recent years, matter of fact, you know, John Roberts is certainly no conservative and he's not a hero of anybody, maybe on the left, but I think it was during the Medicaid expansion case where he said, states are sovereign entities. Sometimes they have to act like it. And we need to do that a whole lot more. The doctrine of non-commandeering, you might hear about that. They recognize that a state does not have to use its resources to implement or uphold any federal policy. Now, they can't interfere per se, but they don't have to use it because we are a sovereign entity. The Constitution was formed, it gave certain powers to the federal government. Most of those powers are in Article 1, Section 8. And there was a lot of concern at the time because a lot of people felt like, hey, we're just recreating what we just fought against. And they didn't want to do that. And so it was not a breeze really trying to get this thing ratified. There were a lot of prominent people that wanted to put the brakes on it. And basically, they basically made the agreement because they tried to get a Bill of Rights added at the end of the convention. That was not going to happen. And so when the ratification process started, and it had to go through all the states to be ratified. Oh, by the way, 9 states had to ratify it. Okay, 9 out of the 13. 2 didn't ratify till later. Okay, North Carolina and Rhode Island they were independent nations for a while. Okay, so everybody was not forced in all at once. And so they basically had to promise a bill that there would, in the first Congress, that they would consider a Bill of Rights to limit, to make sure, to remove any doubt that they were not creating one top-down national consolidated government, because that's what they feared. That's what they feared. They did not want a top-down government. They did not want the mess we have today. Okay, this is not what we have is not what they gave us. But the states have allowed it to become that way. The states have a responsibility in this. Until they step up, things are not going to get better overall. We got Trump right now, and that's great. He's doing some great things. Guess what? We only got him. After 26, first off, we don't know what's going to happen in the midterms. But then after that, we're going to have Trump 2 more years. So keep that in mind when we talk about governor here in a minute. So, just so that you know that this is not just something that sovereignty and nullification, it's another N word, because when people hear nullification, they think it means secession. It doesn't mean secession. Nullification is the way the states keep the federal government in its lane. It's kind of like the necessary and proper clause for the states. Okay, the federal government has a necessary and proper clause which they have abused, just like they've abused the Commerce Clause, just like they've abused the Supremacy Clause, just like all the things. As a matter of fact, all these things, the people that were worried about not having a Bill of Rights, they predicted everything. They predicted that the federal government would abuse these clauses, and they did, even with a Bill of Rights. Because, documents don't enforce themselves. You got to have people that understand it and people who will stand up. Now, I want to read you something, and this is a resolution from 2021 in our state legislature. This is during the COVID garbage. I'm not going to read all this. I'm going to hit the high points. And this had to do with the federal government trying to push vaccine mandates and other things on Tennessee. So, whereas President Biden announced a forthcoming emergency temporary standard to be issued by OSHA regarding COVID-19 vaccinations on routine testing, whereas we're going to force you to vax. That's essentially what they were saying. So, the response. Now, I don't have a very high opinion of our Republican supermajority. I'm a conservative Republican, have been for years, but I don't have much respect for them because I don't see most of them stand up. But hey, you know what? A broke clock is right twice a day. They did the right thing on this. And I want you to remember that. So their response, and this is just part of it, whereas the court acknowledged that a government's police power is in the general power of governing possessed by the state. It's possessed by the state, not by the federal government, as the federal government only possesses enumerated powers listed in the Constitution. That's Article 1, Section 8. So this is our legislature laying it down. The Constitution express conferral of some powers for the federal government makes clear that it does not grant others, and the federal government can exercise only the powers granted. Whereas the independent power of the states to serve as a check on the power of the federal government by denying any one government complete jurisdiction over all concerns of public life and protects the liberty of the individual from arbitrary power. Whereas each member, and this is the key part, each member of the General Assembly has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of Tennessee and of the Constitution of the United States. So only our state legislatures take an oath to uphold both. So they uphold the Tennessee Constitution, they uphold the U.S. Constitution. From a state's legislative perspective, one of the most important amendments in the U.S. Constitution should be the 10th Amendment. Any power not delegated to the federal government is retained by the states. That should be the most important one. Whereas each member of the General Assembly has taken an oath to both of those constitutions, whereas if the federal government intends to overreach its authority to the point that it assumes the traditional constitutional role of a state legislative body, it is only fitting and proper that the very existence as well as the depth and breadth of this federal power be condemned and challenged. Challenged not just in a court of law. We don't just send Skermetti to go groveling, but also through actions of the General Assembly to nullify. To nullify. Not grovel, not beg, nullify. Such federal overreach. Now therefore be it resolved, the state of Tennessee condemns any attempt by the federal government to penalize or tax citizens of this state in an effort to enforce unconstitutional mandate regarding COVID-19. Further resolved, that it is the right of the Tennessee General Assembly to enact such legislation as it deems necessary to nullify actions taken by the federal government regarding COVID-19. So this was just October 2021, not October of 1821. 2021. Now, so what happened is in 2023, well, by the way, I want to say this before I forget. I know a lot of people that believe in the Second Amendment and understand what that Second Amendment is there for. It's not about hunting. It certainly incorporates personal defense. That's a natural right. But it was for, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the freedom of a state, and I know I blew that. I do have my Constitution up here. Remember, a free state, okay? So we're recognizing that we have a right, if our government becomes too tyrannical, to take up arms. We're recognizing that, right? Most people that understand it will tell you that. Now, it always begs, the first two questions that always come up is why we didn't use it during the Obama administration or the Biden administration, but that's for another night. So, does it make sense to you that we have ingrained in our Constitution a right to take up arms against the federal government if it becomes tyrannical, but we don't have a right to tell them no? That makes no sense. You can shoot them, but you can't tell them no. I would think you would tell them no first. That's what nullification is. So, anyway, what happened was 2023, Representative Halsey and Senator Bowling, they bring up this amendment, or excuse me, this bill. And I don't remember the bill number at the time, but basically it was restoring state sovereignty. And it laid out the historical case for this. And then it created 5 different ways that an issue could be considered for nullification. Now, some people say, well, this group just wants to nullify everything. No, we just want to nullify unconstitutional stuff. Okay, if it's legitimate, no reason to attempt to nullify it. But we have basically 5 different ways that this bill would allow something to be considered for nullification. It's just considered because the legislature makes the ultimate decision, except in one case. The governor could issue executive orders. The governors do control the executive branch. They get executive orders if the federal government does something, and he can say, hey, look, we're not going to cooperate, okay? It could come up in a court hearing, and a judge could take it before the legislature. The other thing is one single legislator could say, hey, look, I think this is a problem. And instead of having to go through the committee, instead of getting killed in committee, you got like 5 days for everybody to hear it. Now, everybody might say, hey, there's nothing wrong with this. This is perfectly constitutional. Okay, so the legislature still controls it. And then the other way is you could have up to 10 municipalities and or counties say, hey, we got a problem here. Once again, goes through the process. Instead of the committees, you have a House here, you have the House will hear it, the Senate will hear it, and they'll say yay or nay. And then the other one is, and this number is probably subject to change, 2,000 people, registered voters, have to have at least 25 from each county. Once again, it goes through the process. The legislature still controls it. Well, from the time that they did this document, this resolution, which the governor wouldn't sign, by the way, but we didn't need a signature. In October of 2021, by the time 2023 came around, it was making some headway in the House, and it goes where most good bills go to die, in the Senate. And that's what happened. Not only did it die, it didn't get a second, okay? So we brought it back the next year, 2024. Well, now all of a sudden, we need to send this to summer study. So we finally got a summer study, but in the meantime, they had an AG's opinion. And the AG said, all federal law is supreme, and the Supreme Court's the final arbiter. Well, apparently he doesn't believe that, because by his own standards, there should have never been a case of Hughes v. Lee. Okay, so we've got a two-faced AG, bottom line. Okay, so by their own standard, or his own standard, we shouldn't have that issue. Anyway, so we're going to bring it back this year. We'll see how all that goes. But just remember, if the states don't stand up, the federal government will never fix, DC will never fix itself. We're only going to get so much out of President Trump. I mean, he's fighting every day, But this is not a top-down country. We were not created to be a top-down country. The states have to step up. That's the bottom line. There's no way around that. So we have a website, tncss.weebly.com. That's tncss.weebly.com. Oh, by the way, a couple things. I'm not the founder. I am the co-founder, along with a lady named Karen Bracken, who lives in East Tennessee, very smart lady, very busy lady. She's been in this fight on a lot of issues for a lot of years. And by the way, she does most of the stuff on the website. The website is, we've got a lot of great information on that website. If you're interested, sign up on the Substack. You'll get the information. The Substack will really be important during session, so we'll know when the bill is going to come up in committee. But I want you to think about that. You know, we've been sold a bill of goods for a long time of this idea that the federal government gets to call all the shots, and that no matter what, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter. That's disgraceful. You think about it. We rolled over on prayer, we rolled over on abortion, we rolled over on marriage. What if that's the process and we're going to accept that, what are we going to roll over for next? When they say that you have to let your kid trans when he's 10 years old, are we going to roll over? Now, there is some good news though. We have somebody running for governor who actually respects and understands the U.S. and the Tennessee Constitution. And he's actually proven that he'll stand up. Now, I'm going to tell you a little secret here, and some of the legislators here, but most of our legislators up there don't have a clue about either one of those documents. And a good chunk of them don't care about those documents. So that's just something to keep in mind. But we have a guy running for governor, and Monty Fritts. I'm all in for Monty. But I want to lay out at least 6 reasons, there's at least 6 reasons that you should support Monty for governor. The first is freedom. Less government, more liberty. That's freedom. Responsibility. Not only the government acting responsible, but demanding responsibility of the citizens. Integrity. Monty's got integrity. He's proven that over and over. Most of those people up there don't have any integrity. Tax reduction. You know, we don't have an income tax, but they do have a pretty healthy surplus up there. And you know, they spend more money every year. And I'm sure he'll talk about that in a little bit. But you know what? That money is tied to your freedom. Okay, they're not just taking excess dollars from you, but they're using it against you. Right now, what the AG is doing, they're using your tax dollars against you. And there's so many other things that they do. Look at all the garbage in the schools. That's your tax dollars being used to brainwash and propagandize your kids. Transparency. He'll have nothing to hide. And you know, if you know Monty Bear at all, you know he's going to tell you like it is. He's going to tell you the good, bad, or the ugly, whether you want to hear it or not. And he might tell you more than once. Sovereignty. He understands sovereignty and has respect for sovereignty. So I say we need Fritts. I'm all on board for Monty Fritts, and I'm proud to know him. I'd like to tell you I'm going to introduce him, but there's somebody else who has that distinct honor tonight, and he's one of the other people who actually has a spine, who actually stands up, means what he says. Now, you got to know that most of our legislators up there, they don't actually walk the halls of the legislature. Most of them slither. Okay? But Representative Todd Warner walks and he stands tall. I'll give you District 92, Todd Warner.
We were telling us we're supposed to be Hell's Gate Charter. And I think that the life that we saw live that ended last week, but his word won't end because God had his hand on that man. Charlie Kirk was a Hell's Gate Charter. It's an unfortunate thing that one of the most prominent gates of hell in our society, in our state, and in our nation happens to be the college campus. It's a sad thing that we have allowed a climate to develop where we hate America and hate God on the college campus and try to teach our young people to believe it.
Good evening, folks. It's great to be here in Lawrence County. Thank you, Lawrence, for inviting me down. I'm going to go on and tell you real quick, it's hard to follow a gentleman like Dave Vance. He's tough. I appreciate the work he's done. I've been on his podcast 7 or 8, well, I don't know, 7 or 8, maybe 4 or 5 different times, and he's a true believer in liberty. Again, it's an honor to be down here. A little bit jealous of Lawrence County. As I came down tonight, I live in Marshall and I represent Williamson, Southern Williamson and Marshall County. I drove down on a nice 4-lane highway, something we don't have in Marshall County. And I represent one of the fastest growing areas in the state in the city of Spring Hill. I represent the Williamson County side, and infrastructure and traffic is terrible. The second thing we don't have in Marshall County is we don't have a Keestone. And I'm jealous of that. So this is a very nice place, and Lawrence County is very fortunate to have something like this. And I think it's the second or third time that I've been down. And anyway, it's an honor to be here. I'm shooting from the hip tonight, and like I say, it's hard to follow Dave, and he said a lot about Monty. I got to know Monty Fritts 3.5, 4 years ago when he first got elected. His office was right down the hall from my office. We're on the 4th floor down there in Cordell Hall. They call that D block. That's where the Democrats are, and that's where the super conservatives are. Because leadership hates us because we don't follow what leadership wants us to do. We do what the people want. We do what you want us to do. We vote the way you wanted us to vote. And Monty's done that since he's been down there. He's represented his district and he's represented this state well. And I think if you check his record, you'll see that he's one of the most conservative members of the House. And sometimes we get punished for not following the leader down there, but we like to represent our people. Monty served in our military. I think he told me 13 years. I think he served 8 or 10 before 9/11. After 9/11, Monty went back and served another 3 or 4 years in our military. What a great man. I think he told me when he went back and signed up, he was 40 years old. And I greatly appreciate Monty for that. A few more things I know about Monty Fritts. He's a strong believer in the Second Amendment. I promise you right now, if you felt of his side, he's strapped. And I think Smith & Wesson may be up there close to where he lives, their new plant. And I bet anything right now he's got a Smith & Wesson on his side. With me saying that, I can promise you he will always stand up and he will fight for your Second Amendment right. He's not going to do what's going on and what Dave touched on right now. And it's sad right now in this state that our governor is using your tax dollars to fight against your rights. We got a win a couple of weeks ago when that judge ruled in our favor that you could go armed in state parks and that you could carry with the intent to go armed. And now we've got our governor and our AG working against us, along with some of our leadership, the supermajority, which is not right. Another thing that I can tell you about Monty Fritts, we've seen on the news, we've seen our senators standing beside President Trump this last week as he signed that executive order to send the National Guard to Memphis. Let me tell you something. Under a Fritts administration, we don't need President Trump telling us what to do with that National Guard. He'll make that call, and we won't need Washington running Tennessee. It'll never happen. And I'm going to be short and quick. I want you to hear Monty. We've got 3 candidates, 3 good candidates. I'm not going to sit up here and be negative about nobody. But Tennesseans have got to ask yourself one thing when you go to the poll. There's only one question you've got to ask yourself. And that question is, do you want Washington running Tennessee, or do you want Tennessee running Tennessee? Because the other 2 candidates have hung out in the swamp in D.C. long enough to come home and contaminate us here. And we don't need that. We need a true conservative to take and run this state, and it's that man is Monty Fritts. It's my honor to introduce to you the next governor of the great state of Tennessee, Monty Fritts.
I'll humbly submit Especially the head.
Thank you.
All right.
And lay out my resume, what I have done, not just in civilian work, military work.
I'm sorry, I about cry every time I watch that thing.
I'm running against anybody. I'm running against what I think is established. That there are things that people like me shouldn't even talk about. I think there's a great funds for living in Tennessee. And I think there's a great distrust for the government that's going out of control. The budget is growing out of control. That's not small government. 2 Kings 13 talks about striking the ground with your arrows. I will put my foot many times in each county and say to Tennessee, I will empty my foot into the ground for liberty. Let's go in Tennessee. So I think here's our. Howdy, how are y'all tonight? I am Monty Fritts. I'm going to start like this right here. I didn't wear my hat tonight. Those lights kill my old eyes. And so if I look like I'm squinting, I want to talk to you a little bit about liberty and less government, but I want to talk to you first, friends, about a cloud of dust. And I want to say thank you for coming out tonight to spend this time. I appreciate getting to talk to some of you. John, thank you for coming out specifically. I appreciate it. And I know we've got other candidates. Mr. Davis is here somewhere, and I appreciate you all coming out. But each one of you took time out of your schedule to come out and fellowship tonight and talk and hear more about liberty and less government. And I think there's probably a consensus in this room of people that think that Tennessee is the very best place in the entire world to live. I'm certainly one of those. But there's also a consensus that we can do much better than where we are, and we're trending the wrong way. You know, I didn't realize we were going to put the tape up on the Hell's Gate Chargers. I've used that a lot lately. That's coming from where Jesus said to Peter, he said, upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And so when you think about the design of a gate is not an offensive weapon, a catapult, a tank, a Jeep, a Humvee, or whatever that you charge in. A gate is a fixed position. And so I believe what Jesus was saying was absolutely true. And I think what he was saying to Peter and to us, that we're to be Hell's Gate Chargers. Well, 24 years ago, clouds of evil and darkness invaded our land in New York and Pennsylvania and there in Northern Virginia at the Pentagon. And as a result, we had fire trucks running into a cloud of dust. We had men on an airplane in the skies above Pennsylvania saying a battle cry of "Let's roll." And then we had men and women that volunteered to go to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and they became that generation's Hell's Gate Chargers. Because in each one of those cases, those men and women had charged in to some form of Hell's Gate, if you will. That Hell's Gate Charger mentality reemerged in Tennessee. That same mentality that we had when we earned the title of volunteers. And I think there's a spark for that today, friends. I think that there's dry wood in the barn kindling that just needs a spark. I think you're probably some of that dry wood in the barn, that kindling that needs a spark, and that's why you're here tonight. You know, as a volunteer, we don't send, we go. As a volunteer, we don't talk, we do. Am I right? Is that true? We don't send, we go. We don't talk, we do. And politics, unfortunately, is full of a lot of people who send and talk. We need to change that in Nashville. You know, we've talked a lot about Charlie Kirk over the last few days. And we should, because I think Charlie Kirk was also a Hell's Gate Charger. He was charging one of those gates, as you saw in the video, that has become most prominent in our nation. That Hell's Gate on our college campuses that thinks that it's not only okay to indoctrinate, but now intimidate young people. And
That's not okay. We must choke that out. The enemy is inside our gates, friends. And I don't know how it sounds to you to hear me say that. And I'm not trying to shock you at all. It's just the fact. The enemy is in our gates because the enemy is trying to indoctrinate an entire generation, and has been for decades now, to hate America. They want to indoctrinate our young people with a communistic thought process, and one that dishonors Almighty God. Charlie Kirk did the opposite of that. And so that calls us, I think, as Hell's Gate Chargers, to step up and to charge and to lead, and with compassion and with mercy, but with persistence and determination to make sure that we continue to charge those Hell's Gates. You know, 2 Corinthians 3 tells us that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Have you ever thought about that? That as an image bearer of Almighty God, there's an inherent desire in you to have liberty. And you say, well, Monty, what is liberty? Liberty is very basically that as we stand before Almighty God, we have the opportunity to decide to do good or bad. We have the opportunity to choose A or B, and we fully bear the consequences and the rewards of our decision. That, my friends, is liberty. That is the same liberty that drove those 56 men to risk their lives, their sacred honor, to bring about this great experiment in our republic that we have. Liberty is that same driving force that they put in the preamble of the Constitution, that we would pursue the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And again, here in Tennessee, in the greatest place, I think, in the world, the sweetest soil in the entire world, we must vigorously embrace our liberty. And that means not sitting silently in our churches or in our offices. That awakening that we're seeing around the nation, across our state and around the nation, even around the world, that we have recognized that evil, the enemy, is within the gates in America. Friends, our greatest enemy in these United States is not China. Our greatest enemy in these United States is not a foreign nation. It is an ideology that resists liberty. Let me say that again and make sure you all heard that, because I was expecting an amen. The greatest enemy that we have is an ideology that rejects liberty, an entitlement of many people that have had the privilege to serve in government, that they really don't think they're bound by that Constitution that Dave mentioned a few minutes ago, John. They really don't. And many people that serve in government, many who have gone into it with the right intentions, are soon corrupted by the power and the influence and the money that comes at them. We all know that's true. We see that evidenced this whole Hughes v. Lee appeal, the school vouchers, the farmland preservation. Government offers a carrot. And they offer a carrot often to buy your liberty from you, to extract from you that which God has given you, that which you really can't give up and certainly man cannot take, but they use it to try to extract that liberty from you. A few dollars should not buy our liberty. Because, friends, those few dollars are ones that they've taken from you in ever-increasing budgets, even here in my state of Tennessee. So I'm asking you, this is part of the application process tonight in Lawrence County. Let me lead the charge. Let me lead the charge against the educated beyond their intelligence professors and staff members that want to indoctrinate and intimidate our children. Let me lead the charge that chokes out that ideology in our college campuses and our high school classrooms. Let me lead that charge, because I think the scalpel that we need is the budget. We have funded those ideologies of communism and Marxism and anti-God anti-Tennessee values, and it is time that we stop that in Tennessee. If you hire me, I will do that. That's important for our next generation. It's important for this generation. But we can't continue what we're doing now. Hire me to lead the charge. As I apply to you for this job, hire me to lead the charge against an establishment in Nashville to recalibrate that establishment. To recalibrate them to understand that the standard to which they march, to which they move, is one that is under the authority of the Constitution and at the will of the people. Hire me and I'll recalibrate Nashville. Let us together charge against this embedded bureaucracy in Nashville that has seen fit to raise our budget in 6 years. Of budget requests from the governor's office have gone from $37.5 to $59.5 billion, a 59% increase. If you go back to 2016, it's an 80% increase. Friends, I think I said this the last time I was here. We have a requirement for a balanced budget in Tennessee, and that's a great thing. But if we continue to extract those dollars from your pocket and continue to spend them on woke ideologies, corporate welfare, and socialistic schemes where we buy your liberty from you, Tennessee is not going to be the great place that we want it to be. Hire me, we'll correct that. Let's lead this charge in a direction where everybody's essential. You know, one of the reasons I ran for office is because we did foolish things in Nashville, like declare lawful, licensed even, Tennessee citizens as non-essential. I would have thought we learned better than that with Rosa Parks and the Woolworths counters. I would have thought, but we have not. You see, because the ideology of the political class is not about race, it is about an elitism versus us peasants. Hire me, we'll correct that. For 3 years, I've attempted to get an essentialism bill through. It's my slang for the bill. That says that the executive branch in the state or in the local governments cannot declare you non-essential based on your occupation. Does that seem reasonable in Lawrence County? Does it seem reasonable in Lawrence County that if your executive does that, you ought to be able to sue him or her? I think so. But you know what? The folks in Nashville that lobby against your rights while they're paid by your dollars, do you know what they say about that? And don't trust me. I suspect most of y'all have learned not to trust people in politics. Am I right? Yeah, so go back and check me out. Prove me, test me on this. Go watch the committee meeting where the director of TEMA said that we can't pass Fritz's law because we won't be able to control looting. To which I would respond first, when's the last time the barbers looted or rioted in Tennessee? And what I would say on record to him again, as I did that day, is, sir, you're the exact reason we must pass this law. Hire me, we'll fix that. How will we fix that? I want to give you a couple details because I'm really up to my nose hole sick of these politicians that talk about these big lofty goals of we're going to be the most this or the most that. And they can't even define what this or that is. So I'll tell you how we'll start that turn on that recalibration there. Every legislative director, every person who helps to write, rewrite, and influence and slithers, Dave, down the hallways of Cordell Hall to change and to push the governor's will on legislation will find themselves reassigned or unemployed. They will find themselves reassigned, thank you. They will find themselves reassigned to the governor's hotline when Fritts is governor, where you dial 1-800-GOVERNOR. Now don't check me on the number of numbers there. Where you dial 1-800-GOVERNOR or www.governor email, and you dial 1 or press 1 or direct that to TDOT, or 2 for DCS, or 3 for DHS. You see, we have forgotten in this state that those folks that execute, because the governor's sole responsibility is what? Do you know what it is? It's to faithfully execute the law. what we've decided in Nashville, that we get to pick and choose the laws that we're going to comply with in the executive branch. And so in Todd Warner's district, if there's a problem with the roads or DCS, his constituents must call him. Todd nor I have the authority as state representatives because of Article 2, Section 1 and 2. We can't cross over into the boundaries covered by the governor. So we can ask them for help and try to get them to help, but we can't require it. Meanwhile, the governor has been for years now attending celebrity functions and forgetting about you. I will recalibrate that, I assure you. So I've been fortunate, God's blessed me, and I hear lots of the propaganda coming from other places was, Monty's just going to pull votes off this one or that one. He's not a serious candidate because he don't know enough of the celebrities in D.C. or enough of the celebrities in Nashville or even Hollywood. Monty's just going to pull a few votes off of this one or that one because how much money can he compete with? 20, 25, 30, $40 million, how many the other candidates may spend? Well, I'll tell you, my friends, two things to that. First, do we establish financial levels as to where you get to run for office? The answer is no, that's not American. This is a propaganda put out by an establishment that is afraid of you. They are afraid that you might be that dry kindling in the barn that I mentioned, that dry kindling that needs a little spark and is going to start a fire. The establishment is afraid that you will stand up and let your voice be heard and tell 10 people who will tell 10 people who will tell 10 people that you want liberty and less government in Tennessee. I've been fortunate not to have to take PAC money. And there are some really good PACs. There's some really good PACs. I made that commitment. I ran for state rep because I was suspicious, to be honest with you, about many of the PACs. And let me tell you, those suspicions have come true for many that work adamantly against your rights, and they are well-funded, many of the dollars coming from outside Tennessee, to influence against your rights. So I have learned not to bow to the globalists. I've learned not to bow to those folks that work against your rights. Sometimes, as Todd mentioned, that leaves me and him maybe just 2 steps from having an office in the parking garage. But I can lay my head on my pillow at night and sleep knowing that I'm not paid for. And I think that's important. Lawrence mentioned something, and I'm getting close to closing, and I don't know how long you want me to go. They told me no more than 2 or 3 hours. And so I'd like to, after I finish just a couple bullets here, if you've got questions, be thinking of them. I want to answer your questions because I think I'm also sick of politicians that are afraid to engage directly with the people they say they're going to work for. Thank you. So, friends, I'll tell you this. If you're happy with more D.C. influence in Nashville, Tennessee, and across Tennessee, you're going to have other choices, at least 2 more, maybe some more coming. If you're confident, if you're really confident that somebody that needs to hire a person to manage them for the campaign and tell them what to think and what to say and where they can and can't engage, if you're confident that that's the person can lead and manage the 7 million people of Tennessee and what's interesting to them, then I probably ain't your person. I don't need to be managed. I refuse to be managed by some political operative. That's why we're going to do this mostly on a volunteer basis. Because I need dry kindling, not damp, wet rags that have their hands stuck out for thousands of dollars to tell me what they think I want to hear. You know what happens when you try to burn damp, wet rags, don't you? Has anybody tried that? It stinks. And hasn't it stunk enough to you all in Tennessee in the last few years? Aren't you sick of seeing and smelling the stench that comes from these political machines, well funded, but they're damp, wet rags? We need some dry kindling in Tennessee, so come with me. If you're okay with 4 more years of what we've experienced in the last 6, I'm not your guy. If you think things are going okay and I've got the wrong vision that you need to keep more money in your own pocket, I'm not your guy. If you think that you need somebody that makes more celebrity friends and will just kind of bow down to whatever DC says, I'm not your guy. I will tell you, my friends, I don't care who's in the White House and who's in the outhouse. I don't care who's in Congress in either side. They don't have the authority to take your money and tell you with silly restrictions how you can and can't spend it. We must be willing to nullify those unconstitutional things that come down. And I'll tell you, friends, I think sometimes that's just having the guts to say no. I think sometimes, I think we need the process. I've been a co-sponsor of the bill that Dave mentioned, fully supportive of it. But I think more than that, we just need a willingness to use the most powerful word in the English language. No, we're not going to do that. That's our money. You're not going to hold me hostage ideologically because that's my money. And we're going to have the guts in Nashville from the Attorney General's office to the governor's office to engage and pursue that legally. And again, just say no. If you expect to hire a governor that has been successful, God has blessed me, and demonstrated leadership in corporate boardrooms, in offering liberty-focused legislation in the 3 years I've been in the General Assembly, someone who's competent in uranium synthesis and casting, and someone who's led on a battlefield, you only have one choice. That's all I ask you. If you want liberty and less government in Tennessee, follow me. Get up, be a Hell's Gate charger. Because I will tell you, friends, I don't want to make this too awfully dramatic. I'm going to have to move that light. I don't want to make this too awfully dramatic, but I will tell you this. Taking your money in grocery sales tax. This will be the second year I've tried to start getting rid of the 4% state grocery sales tax. And sending it to the washing machine in Nashville and putting it on spin dry and giving a good portion of that dollar out to a Nissan Titan stadium, that's evil. Now that makes people's heads spin in some places when I say that, but it is evil. We have folks, I guarantee you, living within 5 miles from here that are having a hard time buying their groceries. Good, hard-working people, many of them retired, many of them on Social Security. We can do better than that. And then in that big spin cycle in Nashville that continues to grow, that we don't stop collecting revenue when we've made enough to meet the budget. We keep bringing it in. And that gives us an excuse the next year to raise the budget proposal even more. You've got my commitment that I will only offer budget proposals for essential functions of government. We don't need to be including government programs and initiatives to lead some kind of legacy. The legacy that Monty Fritts wants to leave the state of Tennessee is I was an actual volunteer, and we created a climate of more liberty and less government in Tennessee. And I need you to charge with me for that. I do. I can't do this all by myself. I will run this race ragged, I promise you. But I need you to call those 10 people who will call 10 people who will call 10 people. I need you to keep calling them. I need you to pray for me. I need you to pray for me that I'll continue to do what's right in God's eyes. And I need you to be committed enough that when you see me step outside that in my duties of working for you, that you will correct me. We're okay with a little theology for just a minute? Am I too late? Am I going long? So here's what I think. I think that those 56 men I mentioned earlier that signed that Declaration of Independence were put here specifically by Almighty God. I am not comparing us to Israel, and I'm not comparing them to the tribes or anything like that, but I'm telling you, that same Lord that said that not a sparrow falls from the sky and not a hair falls from my gray head that he doesn't know about, then certainly there's no way that this experiment in liberty was some happenstance that surprised Almighty God. If that is true, and I hold that that is true, if that is true, then he was also infinitely involved and definitely involved and completely involved in this Constitution, because you see, Almighty God didn't give us a nation to be ruled by a prince, a potentate, a governor, nor a president. He gave us a republic, a constitution. And if we get outside the bounds of that constitution, now get your church hats on for just a minute. I'm going to need a couple of, I got to have at least 2 amens with this. And I really believe this. I'm having a little fun, but I really believe this. When your politician gets outside his or her bounds of the Constitution, they give your money away in socialism because that's unconstitutional. If we're deciding that we're going to give money based on how much money they make or any criteria, these grants where we recycle your money, any county leaders in here? Yeah, so where we say, if you'll stick your hand out and say pretty please, we'll send you some of your money back if you'll match that money with your matching money. Am I right? That happens. Let me tell you, friends, when you get to outside the bounds of that Constitution, it is not just a constitutional high crime, it is a great sin before Almighty God. And until we, the church, and I'm assuming most of y'all are Christians, I'm assuming, but until we, the church, reach the realization that it is a sin, Todd, we won't know how to properly address it. We've sat quietly and timidly, and we've watched what has happened to our nation, and we've been afraid to get engaged. Now is the time, my friends. If you don't get a spark in that dry kindling in the barn that I'm talking about now, I'm afraid the rain's coming and our wood's going to get wet. We cannot allow that to happen. I have grandchildren. Some of you do. Some of you are still having children. This is not acceptable in our nation. Now is the time to stand up. Now is the time to get engaged. We can't stand another 4 years of a Bill Lee. We cannot. We cannot stand another 2 years of a weak and feckless General Assembly that can't even protect your right to keep and bear arms, refuses to deal with it in most cases. Now's the time for you to get engaged. There's an urgency in this call. It has nothing to do with Monty Fritts. I will be that front man. I will be the one that leads this charge, but it really has nothing to do with me. I will be glad to be the one that takes the barbs and the arrows and all the ugly things they're going to say about me and my family, because as soon as I become a threat, I'm not sure they've awakened yet. As soon as they realize how much trouble they're in with the dry wood in the barn, here it comes. I'll take that. And I'll keep my feet moving forward and charging into that hell's gate, but you've got to go with me. And you've got to be willing in the town halls, in the city halls, in the county commissions, and in your Sunday school classes. Yes, I said Sunday school. You've got to be willing to talk about what's right and wrong first in God's eyes and then in the Constitution's eyes. If we don't reach that point, our wood is going to get wet, and it's going to be next to impossible to get it lit again for liberty. So I'm asking you. I'm going to stop with this. I'll take questions or whatever Lawrence tells me to do. I love you for letting me be here. I love you for listening to a country boy from Roane County. My dear wife of 42 years almost is standing right back there waving at her. She's kind enough, she knows I feel called to do this. And I don't know how that sounds to most of you all. And I don't mean this mean, I don't really care, I'm just being honest with you. I feel called to do this. It doesn't mean God's ordained me. I think we have other candidates that think they're ordained. I think we might have some that are so entitled that they think that after they get this this job because you just got to put them in that they're going to get to pick that person, and then he'll get to pick the next person. You all see it happening. And I don't think they realize how much dry wood there is in the barn. Are you willing to be that dry wood in the barn? Are you willing to be that Hell's Gate charger? Are you willing to call not just your friends in Lawrence County and Lewis County and McNair County, but call all the way to Sullivan County and Shelby County and everybody you know and say, hey, I want liberty and less government. How do you feel? It ain't got anything to do with the old Fritts boy from Keestone. Because I could be Balaam's donkey and preach this message of liberty and less government, and folks from New York would say, you know what? I like the sound of that. They would. Because you have that image bearer relationship with Almighty God, and if He indeed, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, then there's a desire in your heart for it. So if you'll hire me, we're going to push toward that. Thank you.
You stay up here. Stay up here with the question. I'm going to do it up here. All right, everybody, we're going to take questions up front. We have, Grace will have the microphone. If you want to come down and ask your question right here, we're going to do it. We're going to do it live, and it's even being recorded live going on YouTube. How many candidates do you know that will do that? That are brave enough to do that? Not many.
Lawrence, did they get the list of questions they're allowed to answer or ask?
Shh. Weren't supposed to
Oh, we
tell
didn't do that?
No.
I thought everybody did that.
No.
Okay.
No, we didn't do that. I'm not smart enough.
You mean they can ask anything they want to?
Anything.
And if I don't know, I'll say I don't know.
Correct.
And if they can't handle the answer, don't ask the question.
That's right.
All right, let's go.
Okay. One last thing before we leave, after we do the questions. I would invite everybody to come down here to the main area here, and I'm going to ask Chris Stutz to come down, and we're going to lay hands on Monty, and we're going to pray for his protection, and we're going to pray for this true man of God. We have a true man of God that is running for governor. How often have we wished for this? How often have we wished for this, everybody? And we have it right now. Like Monty said, is money going to take this to win? Not for Monty. Not for Monty, it's not. Are we going to need money? Yes, we will. But I'll tell you what we need more than anything is we need you to tell your neighbors, your family, your friends, get out to help, get out to volunteer, grab signs, do whatever that you want. Go to the website and put in the website, hey, I want to help Monty. This is what I'm willing to do. And even if it's prayer, we'll take it. So I'm going to turn this back over to Monty. Ask all the questions you want.
Thank you, brother. Yes, sir.
Article 11, Section 18 of the Tennessee Constitution says the only marriage that is recognized in the state of Tennessee is the historical marriage of a man and a woman. What does Governor Fritts do when he takes office?
I think that the first thing that we need to do in that is practice that same ability to say, no, we're not going to play these silly games. 9 people in black robes do not get to redefine what the definition of Almighty God has set forth. It's just that clear. We shouldn't recognize that. I get lots of questions. Can I tell you funny as I answer that? I hope I answered your question straight. We had a bill, Bulso did an amendment on it last year, year before last. I had so much fun with it. I don't think that we need to be getting into restricting that institution of marriage because it is God defined, right? And it's one man, one woman. But there were 4 Democrats, I think, and I like most of them, but they offered a you can't marry your first cousins bill. Did y'all hear about that? Well, I got to make you laugh a little bit because it's true. They offered it, and they got it up, and Bulso offered an amendment to it. Well, I voted with Bulso, and at the end of the day, it turned out that there was just a few of us that had voted against this legislation. And so it just made the media's head spin. And so I got asked this question again. I think it's back in the Chattanooga paper, and it gets me in trouble. That's the reason we don't show pictures of our grandkids and stuff, because people are crazy. And anyways, the reporter said, well, Representative Fritts, and this is the most recent one. So Representative Fritts, I'm looking at your record, and you voted against the First Cousins bill. And I said to the nice young person, I said, you know, I find it odd that of all the things we've been able to accomplish, because, you know, I carried the legislation 3 years ago, that a person shall not be required to solemnize a marriage to protect pastors and civil leaders, that you can't be forced to perform a marriage, right? And I think that's important. And that comes from a friend of mine who's a county mayor back in East Tennessee, and he said he was getting much pressure to be forced into doing things that were against his moral code. And I said, well, I think we can fix that. And God gave us the ability to fix it, and we did. So that's law in Tennessee. You can't be forced to solemnize a marriage. And that's a liberty bill. But anyways, this young man asked that question, and after I got past the shock that was the first thing he was most interested in, I said, first and foremost, if you're marrying your first cousin, you're probably not getting out enough, and you need to travel a little bit more. And I said, secondly, this was just something that those Democrats carried because they were making fun of us native Tennesseans that have accents like me. It was. They were just making fun of us. And they were trying to poke. And in reality, the bottom line is government needs to stay out of trying to redefine who can get married, right? But a man can't marry a man. They can commit an abomination with a man, but they can't marry a man, right? That's God's word. So anyways, the last part of the question, it probably got me a little notoriety or hate mail or something at some point in time, was I said, well, looking at 3 or 4 of those people that carried this piece of legislation and the way they voted on things, they've been historic inbreeding in their families. And so I think if you look at the last week or so's Chattanooga paper, I think that's the one asked me it. I think he put it in there because I've gotten a couple more questions about it. So I hope that answers your question. Next question. Chris Morris.
You ready for me?
I am. Let's all give him a hand.
Thank y'all. Something that's near and dear to my heart is protecting our constitutional rights. And we all know about Hughes versus Lee. The governor and the attorney general have violated their constitutional oath that they took. So I hope everybody in this room will agree with me. But another thing that's been taken away from us is our autonomy of our own party by our own House members, those trans Republicans that we've got up there in both the House and Senate. And we had a law that was carried. It was House Bill 855 and Senate Bill 799. The House bill was carried by Lee Reeves out of Williamson County, and Senate bill was carried by Jack Johnson, your Senate Majority Leader. They stripped the Republican Party's rights to hold a caucus. And it's not the government's right to legislate a private party. So, Representative Fritts, what say you on this bill that passed and our governor signed into law that's unconstitutional?
So let's refer to Mr. Morris's question as the intent to something, because I'm going to have a little fun with this one too, all right? So you all know the Hughes v. Lee case is all about the language, 154-year-old Jim Crow language in our code that says intent to go armed. And it basically makes you a criminal for carrying a pistol on your hip or a rifle or whatever. And you have to have an excuse or a defense against that, like our open carry or our permitted carry is actually just a defense against that. So let me and I promise I'm getting to his question, but you'll understand this after I explain it. So the governor and the attorney general want to maintain that intent to go armed, which means, brother, me and you are innocent, or guilty rather, and we have to prove our innocence. Does that sound like America to y'all? No, I couldn't hear you. Does that sound like America to y'all? No. That's right, it is not America. But that's the way the code's written right now. So intent to go armed is something that they want to keep. And what Chris just described is the intent to go caucus bill. Because what they did, now that's not the way it was written, but that's what they did, is it not? They carried a bill that said thou shalt not, basically. And you can't do those causes. And it stripped the rights away from local organizations, private organizations to do these causes. It gets even worse, friends. I voted against it, right? But there's no liberty focus in the people that are doing that. There's not. They have lost their way. And some of them, it didn't take them long to lose their way. The first year they got there, they were lost balls in tall grass. But some of them have become that in time. So then the next day after we pass this, and I know this is Brother Todd's one of his one of his pet peeves, is we started seeing on the Senate side after it had passed, and Warner and I both didn't vote against it, and I think many of the people out here didn't, but it passed. Many Republicans voted for this intent to go caucus bill. And the next day, there's a Senate committee, and they're saying, we've got to pass this $8 million budget amendment. And so we watched the video. And they said, well, why are you passing this? Well, we've got to pay for that bill yesterday. Well, wait a minute. The bill we passed yesterday said no fiscal note. And what no fiscal note means, my friends, is that there was no cost to that bill. Yet the very next day, we come back in and pass $8 million to pay for it. Underhanded. So, Fritts is not in support of intent to go armed code, nor the intent to go caucus, Chris, if that answers your question.
It did.
Yes, sir. Next question, Mr. Davis.
Yes, first, thank you for mentioning me. I appreciate that. The next, and I'll get to a question, but welcome home, brother. I will tell you that. And I'm in. I will call my 10 for you, sir. And the question being is, and I gave you the heads up, is how do we make sure that the VSOs in the counties are funded? And then before you answer, I will tell you that I usually start mine with, I only answer the easy questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Davis, for the question. So I think there's a couple first steps in that. One is what I think I already told you all, is we need to stop attempting to fund in the governor's budget those things that are outside the role and function of government. Some of these socialist-leaning, fiscally illogical things, and I'll step on a couple toes as I get to that answer, a couple toes praying Nashville. This year's budget, I voted against the budget this year. We hear things, Todd and I do, that it's like the death sentence if you vote against a Republican budget, right? Well, here I am. And a couple of the things that created that and how we fund the VSOs. We had $25 million in this year's budget for a farmland preservation bill. And that sounds good, right? Until you start to pull the layer off, or what I would call the scab off of it. Because, first of all, there's going to be a bureaucrat in Nashville that gets to decide who gets to participate in that, so it's not for all Tennesseans. That's problematic. Secondly, when I asked the governor's office about that $25 million, I said on both the ag committees, I said, if we had a $25 million pie chart, how much of that $25 million to buy these easements in perpetuity, that means forever, to your next heir and the heir after that and the heir after, kind of like selling your birthright. I'm just being honest. How much of that goes to a Tennessee farmer, and how much of that $25 million pie chart goes to an attorney, and how much of that $25 million pie chart goes to an NGO, which might not even be in Tennessee? Well, we don't know that, Representative Fritts, and I'm thinking, well, shouldn't we figure that out before we propose this? So, $25 million, we are losing farmland at a great clip. Part of the issue with this, and I have green belted property, I'm sure some of y'all do, but property taxes have become a problem in Tennessee, and we need to deal with property taxes in Tennessee. And I'll take this, Mr. Davis, I'm not trying to give you the 8-hour answer, but it's important. You'll see a bill from me this year we've been working on for about 6 months that does two things with property taxes. Right now, all of us are Republicans. We don't have any Democrat spies in here, do we? Stand up if you're a Democrat spy. Most of us Republicans will tell you we're not in favor of unrealized capital gains, right? We want our 401s. I'm actually against all the taxes on my 401ks, but especially the unrealized capital gains. Like if I put $50,000 in back when I was young and it's worth $500,000 now, you shouldn't be able to charge me taxes on that, right? That's an unrealized capital gains. Yet your real estate that happens every year. Because some of us that bought our house, and we may have paid $300,000 for a house 7-8 years ago, and it's worth $700,000 now, and you're being taxed against that value. So we need to end the unrealized capital gains taxation. And the Constitution, the state of Tennessee, does allow us to raise funds by property tax, right? And so you can't just get rid of the property tax unless you amend the Constitution, and then you got to have another funding mechanism. That's a whole other question. But the bill I'm offering this year will fix as it's written, will fix your property tax at the 2020 value or what you've paid up or down for it since. And if you're an American citizen, it will prevent the government, that's at all levels, from evicting you for your property because you're delinquent in taxes. I think that's important. I don't think that we shouldn't have to worry about, if you owe money, you've established some covenant with the bank to keep taxes and insurance in an escrow, right? And that's a whole kind of different thing. That's an agreement between two people. But the government shouldn't be able to evict you from your property because you're delinquent. And the bill, just like now, if Denise and I were to meet, if we're up too late and we were to meet our demise tonight driving back to Kingston, then our estate would have to be settled and any debt that we had would have to be disposed of before my heirs would get the money, right? So it doesn't change that. It just prevents the eviction. So I think that's certainly a part of that. But farmland preservation is not the way to do that. And it's not the way to do this socialistic eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Then there's a $60 million in this year's budget that was set aside to provide 0% interest loans to new home construction for starter homes. Well, that sounds warm and fuzzy too, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds good. That's helping somebody out. But that's your money. It is not the role of government to provide interest-free loans for people. I know we've done it in other places. It's just not the role of government. And so those two things are wrestling. Those two things are wrestling, and that's only $85 million. But those are two things that are wrestling against one another. And we did some illogical things in the budget, and it's socialistic in my view, and we've got to stop doing that. I will not do that. How do we fund the VSOs? So this year, the Tennessee Department of Veterans Services, who I think do pretty good work, every time I call them for something or I have a veteran in need, they try to respond. We were up to 22 veteran suicides per day at one point in time. The last number I saw, 17. One's too many, right? God, that's right. Give the veterans a hand, because God didn't make our eyes have to look on things or our hands to do the things that a soldier or Marine or sailor or an airman have to do. They just shouldn't. And those cause long-term wounds, I think. But I did, now these are my numbers, Davis, $85,000 fully burdened cost for a veteran service officer. Okay, so if that number's wrong, that's Monty's bad math, right? But veteran service asked for 4 in the governor's budget, which again was 59% larger than it was 6 years ago, his budget request. And they had asked for 4 VSOs at Monty's country boy analysis of $85,000 a year fully burdened labor cost. And he only gave them 2. So I did 8 budget amendments last year. 5 of them were to take money out of the budget that I thought we were spending. I've given an example of one of those, but I had 5 different things I tried to pull money out of the budget. I was the Doge in Tennessee this year. I was unsuccessful in all of them. I apologize. But it's, again, it's just difficult to get people to stand up to the leadership. There's a handful that do, and there's a whole bunch that are just like little sheep. And is that right? Amen. Yep. I knew I'd get an amen there. So the whole time that budget has gone up by 59% over 6 years, guess what's happened to our Tennessee spending on our veteran services? It's gone down. What is wrong with these people? So I would offer you this too, and I'll put another plug in why you ought to hire me. It's been a while since we've had a veteran as the governor of the state of Tennessee. By gosh, it's about time we got one in there. Because, you know, I'm all for the all-volunteer force. Not everybody should have to serve in the service. I'm not one of these draft everybody and, you know, force, you know, like other countries do, force everybody to go serve so long. I'm not. But what I am an advocate for is understanding what it's like to watch your husband get on a bus and head off to Iraq. What I am all for is understanding what it means when that little 6-year-old I watched down at Rockwood, we sent 700 soldiers to the Middle East last year, Tennessee National Guardsmen. Why? I don't know, because it's an undeclared war, and it's 20-something years into it, right? It's crazy. But I saw little kids grab their, and I've been on the other side of that, where I had to kiss my wife and kids by, and that's a hard thing, even for a 40-year-old man then, that was a hard thing. But I'm telling you, it's even worse if you're standing there as an old grandpa that's kind of soft-hearted now, and you see that little 7-year-old latch onto daddy's leg. No, daddy, don't leave me. Please don't leave me, daddy. Daddy, don't you go. I'm going to miss you terribly, daddy. Daddy, don't leave. Oh my gosh, it ripped my guts out. I had to leave. I was bawling in public. But we have so many politicians that somehow they feel more masculine by standing and sending our sons and daughters off to some hygienically challenged part of the world to bleed and perhaps die on an undeclared war with an undefined mission, and we need to stop that too. So finally, the answer to Mr. Davis's question. Stop spending the corporate welfare. Stop these ding-a-ling special, I want to be remembered for something budget items. Take care of the veterans services. Make sure that we don't have veterans, because you know those 4, Davis, you know what they were going to do with them? This comes from General Baker's staff. They were going to do outreach in hospitals, nursing homes, and jails. Let that sink in. These are the most vulnerable of the people, and they wanted to do outreach, and they could only get 2 in the budget. I tried to add 2 in, and I couldn't get any traction with it. I promise you, I got a veteran's heart. We'll do better. Fritts is up on the hill.
Hello. Texas has gone and is attempting to do gold currency. They're establishing a depository. And I just wondered what your stand and what we can do in Tennessee to do the same type of thing that Texas has already implemented, a gold currency.
What's your name, sir?
Jerry Lertz.
Thank you for the question. Where are you from?
Tennessee.
Okay, good, yeah. Were you born here?
No, I'm an expatriate from Michigan.
All right, good. I knew you didn't have a Tennessee accent. I wasn't being a smart aleck. But I got a keen ear from that. When I worked in D.C., because I worked up there for about 7 years, and people would stop me on the street. About half of them don't speak English in D.C. And they'd say, "Where are you from? Where did you get that cute accent?" I'd say the Bronx. Ask me your question one more time. I got so lost in that whole having fun with you.
Gold currency.
Yes, I got you. So Representative Halsey has been a real leader in both nullification and that. I don't know that I've got that completely figured out, but I am supportive of what Bud has tried to do. He's trying to set up an ability for us to have evaluation on precious metals in Tennessee, because lots of us are concerned about this digital currency thing that's pushing amongst the globalists and the communists, and that we feel like we've got to do something. I have an MBA at UT, but I didn't study that, so I can't give you a good technical answer. Can you ask me something about uranium?
Actually, I can.
And I promise you I'm not putting you off with it. I'm giving you an honest answer. I can't give you a lot of details. I think that we need to start doing that. We've so devalued our currency. These people in D.C., and everybody that's been in D.C. for more than 4 or 5 years is a culprit in breaking the generation of that young lady that stands next to you. And we should boo them when they come into the room. We should. We should boo them on their budgetary performance because most of them haven't had the guts. There's a few, Eli Crane and people like that have stood against these crazy budgets. But $37 trillion in debt, when that happens and they devalue our currency through inflation, and then we keep the sales tax where it's at, the little old lady that lives in the single wide when what we call south of the river in Kingston can't afford to buy 2 loaves of light bread anyways, and now she's paying twice as much in taxes to the state of Tennessee because the bread went from $2 a loaf to $4 a loaf. And when I talk to I have some of my colleagues say, well, Monty, I've been here for 37 years. We've never really raised taxes. And they don't understand what we're doing to people with that. So there's a lot of concern about that amongst a small group of us. I don't have a really good answer other than I'm supportive of doing something to protect Tennesseans.
Can I get a little harder commitment?
Well, yeah, I could make up something that was complete bullshit and tell you, but I'm not going to do that. I am telling you that I am in favor of doing something. Pardon me, sir, my friend from Michigan, I love you. I just don't let people push me into answers that I'm not ready to give yet, and I don't know enough about the subject matter answer to give you something that's correct. Sorry, I didn't mean to use that word with young people in here.
They've heard.
My inner redneck popped out.
It can eat.
Yes.
You mentioned it a minute ago, but I kind of want to go a little more clarity on it, just so the people know. You talked about not sending our guys off to undeclared wars. Now, there's a bill that was sent to summer study this year, the Defend the Guard bill. So I think it's safe to say, and all that bill requires is, look, if there is not a declaration of war, we are not going to send our National Guard overseas. So if that bill is passed, then I think we could be confident that you would sign it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a co-sponsor on that bill now. Michelle Renault is carrying that bill this year. I think Jay Reedy carried it last year, Dave, as I recall. And all of our military falls subject to that. But the reason that Defend the Guard just it's a Tennessee National Guard thing is because, again, we go to these going away parties. All the politicians do. They take the airplane rides and all that kind of stuff. And they've fallen into this military-industrial complex train of thought that, well, if we don't send them, they'll stop sending us new tanks and airplanes. I've heard that. I've heard that from people that shouldn't say that. I've heard things from people that shouldn't say it that swore the same oath that you and I swore with the Army, Dave, that said things like, well, an NDAA is all I need for a declaration of war. That is not the case, folks. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional attorney. And again, I apologize for using that language with young people in. That's really not a bad word in Roane County. I don't know what it is in Lawrence County. But anyways, that should apply to all of our military. We should be righteously indignant that anybody is continuing to send troops around the world. I fully support our president being able to fly an aircraft, a rocket, a sub, an 82nd Airborne if there's an imminent attack upon the United States. But it's a whole other thing when we're rotating guardsmen in just to stay on the good side of a Pentagon that might punish us for it. Our current Secretary of Defense was on the record before he became Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth. I've met him. Nice guy. This is no criticism of him. I think he's doing a really good job. But he was on the record of saying that he was kind of in favor of the Defend the Guard. Pete Hegseth was once a National Guardsman. Now, he was, I think, in Minnesota, which scares me a little bit. But honorable guy. I'm trying to get a smile there with this because this is a serious topic, too. We should not allow that to take place. We have to push back. We have to push back. And absolutely, I'd sign it.
Thank
Let me ask you a question, is Dave, how many of y'all have seen your son, daughter, husband, wife, child, whatever, deploy off to a combat zone the last 10 years? Raise your hand. Yeah. It's a gut-wrenching thing. And, we find ourselves now, I'll get into another topic quickly. Don't let me go too long. You'll stop me when you want me to, because my wife will tell you I'll talk as long as you'll talk. We're deploying guardsmen to Memphis. And the thing I like about President Trump is that he's bold enough to act. And he's human. I don't think he's always right about everything, but he's bold enough to act. We have so many weak people in so many government offices. We've been completely empowered under Article 3, Section 5 of the Tennessee Constitution, I think, to send the Guard down to Memphis to stop what I would call a criminal rebellion for some time. And I have to ask myself, and this will, I'm sure, get other people that won't speak to me anymore when I say this, but it bothers me that we have to stand next to President Trump to act like we're doing something when you already had the authority to do it. And all kinds of thoughts about that. And, for me, just about everything goes back to gun rights, because I think it's the greatest litmus test of what your politician thinks about what your God-given rights are. First, they're absolute. Joe Biden said they weren't, so they must be. Right? And your rights are absolute. Your gun rights are absolute. Your First Amendment rights are absolute. All of the Bill of Rights I consider absolute statements. But when we appeal the Hughes v. Lee verdict, and we continue to infringe upon all our rights and assume us to be guilty first, and perhaps dissuade that man, woman, or teenager who can legally carry, which is of age, right? They think there's a whole other conversation about that too that we ought to have. But anyways, when we dissuade them from carrying, we make Tennessee less safe, not just Memphis. We make Tennessee, the armed public is the safe public. Because when we disarm a public, when we offer these foolish, paid for by your money, as others have said tonight, to try to keep your rights away from you, and we discourage you from having your Smith & Wesson or your Glock or your Kimber or whatever, your Ruger or whatever you carry on your hip, the predatory people of this world know that. And gun-free zones are areas where that cities, these failed blue states called Democrat-led cities, they make everybody less safe. Because the evil people, it's like a wolf and sheep. They see a herd of sheep that they can go pillage. And so I wonder sometimes if these people are so intellectually slow that they don't get that. Or if they just really hate your rights and they think they're elite because they've got armed bodyguards around them and they live behind walls. And so the first thing Tennessee ought to be doing to help Memphis is saying, by gosh, don't you be infringing upon those Memphians' rights to keep and bear arms. And you bad people that want to be the predator, beware, because the good people of Memphis are armed. That's the first thing you got to do. And then the second thing you got to do, if you live there and you're from there and you represent that area and you think it's a good idea today, why wasn't it a good idea 6 months ago? Why wasn't it a good idea a year ago that you go do an Article 3, Section 5? Because Article 3, Section 5 Tennessee Constitution talks about rebellion and invasion. And in cases of rebellion and invasion, the governor can deploy the militia. And it talks about the Army and Navy of Tennessee. The only Navy we have now is on Saturdays, so it don't really apply. But it's referring to the National Guard, right? Now, that's the way we look at it anyways. And it says that if he's going to do that, or she's going to do that, the governor, the General Assembly shall declare by law. I think, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I think the reason it says that is because the General Assembly is the one that has to give the permission to send the citizens of the Tennessee off to fight against a rebellion or invasion, and they have to pay for it because there's a cost, right? So then you have to ask yourself, what is a rebellion and an invasion? So 2 years ago, I thought we had an invasion at the southern border of the United States. As a matter of fact, Denise and I went down, we flew an F-250 all the way through Houston and down to McAllen, Texas, just to get a look at it myself. And it was worse than what you saw on Fox News. It was so bad that as I stood on the Rio Grande River, and there was a little inlet, what we'd call a slough in East Tennessee, come off the Rio Grande River. And as I looked across the Rio Grande, I could see the path where they brought the human traffickers down and forced them to swim across carrying drugs, or to use them for the sex trade or whatever, or sending thieves across to play like raiders in McAllen, Texas, a city of 140,000 people. And when they took us down there, I found it interesting that they took us to the water intake for the water plant. And so we go through, it wasn't the Trump wall there, it was the George Bush wall. And it was a notable structure in itself, but Biden had all the walls welded open. So there's gates, there has to be gates in the wall to get traffic through, and they're all welded open. So as soon as you get across the river, you've got free reign to get all the way up into Texas, right? And I noticed there was a chain link fence went across this slough. And so I asked the old boy, his name was Awful Brand, and he was like the water department director. I said, why do you have a chain link fence there? He said, that's to catch the bodies. So what do you mean? He said, they force so many people to swim across the river that they drown, and they get sucked into our water intake for the city, and so we had to put up a filter to catch the bodies. So because I'd seen that and heard that, and he'd told us all kinds of things, we need to come back to Tennessee, we decided, well, we'll just go do an Article 3, Section 5, and we'll give the Governor Lee the authority to be able to send the Tennessee Army National Guard down to Texas to help them. Todd remembers this. And we got it passed, and we put, I think, $5 million or $6 million, $5 million with that to pay for deploying a brigade-sized force, which was calculated for fiscal note at 2,000 people. I wrote that bill. We got it, we signed it, and I thought, we're going to do something. We're going to help Texas again. You know, kind of goes back to the whole Alamo thing and David Crockett. And I thought that's what we were supposed to do. So if you're brought onto a deployment, you're either on state orders or you're on Title 10 federal orders. Everybody familiar with that? Those veterans know what I'm talking about? Our families? Well, we sent some people down before this was signed into law, but what the military department showed me in Tennessee, we didn't send any afterwards. And we were in a full-on invasion, in my opinion. In my assessment, had we stopped some of those paramilitary groups, because guess what? The second most popular, now English and Espanol are common in McAllen, Texas, because it's right on the Texas border. And there's 11 gates that go across or bridges that go across the Rio Grande, and we want that trade with Mexico, right? But the next language, guess what it was that they needed to talk to those people that were coming across, most of them male? Mandarin Chinese. Yeah, so there is, whether the folks are from Europe or from Asia or from South or Central America, when they come across that border illegally, they're a criminal. We shouldn't be paying for their school, and we shouldn't be paying for their health care. We need to stop that now. If you look at our little list of 10 things, I think you'll see that on the Fritts agenda. These people are scared to death to talk about it because we had some senator cry last year. Did y'all hear about that? And I'm not going to mention his name. You can go look it up for him because I can't remember which one it was. There's a couple of them that probably cry easy. But they're, am I right? Amen. Yeah, so we did a bill that would, I know it's a long answer, and I'm not trying to keep you standing there till your knees lock. I promise I'll get to your question. We did a bill because I think part of what we do is we incentivize illegals coming here, right? All human beings created in God's image, just like me or my grandkids. Before Almighty God, just as valuable as Monty Fritts is. But when they come across that border, the adults are criminals. And if they bring children across the border, should you, the taxpayer, have to pay to educate foreign children? Probably most people are going to say no. And then when you consider, I talked to a Crossville school teacher, I don't know, a couple months ago. It was in July, we're doing this Pray Across Tennessee thing again. In 25. And I think she told me she had 19 kindergartners in her class and 7 of them spoke no English. Well, guess what that means for the other kids? I'm not going to do that math in front of y'all, so I'll mess it up and you'll never vote for me. But What happens to those other kids that are from here or Michigan, or they're legally in this country? They don't get that attention. It's much worse than just your dollars being expended. It is the opportunity to learn. And that bill that we carried simply said this: when you register your kid for school, and it would have been this last fall, bring a birth certificate or other documentation that proves that they're legally here. And if not, pay the TSA amount before they go to school. I think that's fair. I think it's absolutely fair. Oh my goodness. Dead as a rock when it goes through. Couldn't get the votes for it. So I've rambled a little bit. All that is connected. It is connected to your gun rights. It is connected. When you think about that, the same people that think they can tell you can't go armed or you're a criminal and they get to provide exceptions for the criminality are the same people that are saying we want you to pay to educate children of the entire world. Think about that. They're not standing up. They're the same people that sat for years as Memphis went into demise. And we talked a lot. We're going to do all these good things in Memphis. But we had to have somebody with guts named Donald Trump. And whether that's the right thing to do, I got to tell you, Tennessee should have handled this whole thing in Memphis. We didn't need the federal government to do it. We had the people to do it. What is wrong with us? Elect stronger men. I'll stop with that. What's your question, sir?
Unfunded mandates, how do you feel about those, in particular from the state down to the counties? As an example, specifically, I'd focus on schools. We've been forced to, by next year, have the starting wage for a teacher to be $50,000 a year. Some counties that may work, others I don't know that it does. And we're not getting any help on that. We're being told in so many ways, as you already mentioned, we have to pay for students that are here illegally to be educated, and at the same time we have to take kids that have behavioral issues and we have to deal with it, not the parents. All this is that's mandated on us. Our increase for people that are need assistance now in schools are up to somewhere around 20-something%, which is a massive hole into our budget. And all this mandated amount of money that has to go to the schools. How do you feel about that? And would you address that once you're governor?
Yes, yeah. And so a couple things come to mind. There are no short answers from Monty, right? There's a few that are yes and no, but yeah, we will address that. And I think we address it first by doing this. This whole voucher scam that was passed is first unconstitutional. Article 11, Section 12 of the Tennessee Constitution clearly says in the second sentence, the General Assembly shall provide for the maintenance, support, and eligibility standards for a system of free public schools. I think that is a specific and restrictive statement constitutionally. I think we had no authority to expend tax dollars in private schools, just like we would have no authority that if Denise and I wanted to buy a Lariat F-250 rather than an XLT, that you all ought to have to contribute for the difference in the options. That's what I think. And so I think, and I will, we'll suspend that voucher scam when you let me. And that's going to make some people's heads explode, right? The 20,000 people, lots of good people that have applied for it. Okay. I'm not picking on them. I'm saying that the government didn't have any authority to do this, and we got to suspend it. Second thing we do is a new commissioner of education who ought to have been a teacher somewhere in Tennessee and ought to love the country. It doesn't need to be a DEI hire, or it doesn't need to be a leftist from California like Ms. Schwinn was. Not all people from California are leftists, for those of y'all in California, but Penny Schwinn is. And it should scare you to death that the Nashville establishment that we're running against, because I'm not running against Miss Rose or Mr. Rose, Mr. Rose or Miss Blackburn. I am not running against them. I'm running against an embedded establishment that thinks that you don't matter. And they just might happen to be a part of that. But the new commissioner will get the opportunity to define what the base capability for education is in the state of Tennessee. You say, well, Monty, why is that important? Because that same second sentence of Article 11, Section 12 that I just talked to you about, when you read it in verbatim compliance, and I'll give you an example from today. When you read it in verbatim compliance, that means you must do what each word tells you to do, right? It says the General Assembly shall, that means you don't have an option, you must, provide for the maintenance, comma, support and eligibility standards of a system of free public schools. Currently, we shift through this TISA formula, which I think was a setup for the voucher scam, now that I look back on it. I wasn't there when TISA was voted in, but I think that's what it was. That will make head spins to hear that. But we have shifted 30% of that cost back onto the counties, right? And so I don't know what it is here in Lawrence County, but in Roane County, I'm told it's 61% of the county budget. So there's no way, I'm already talking about cutting to what is government function, right? According to the Constitution, shall provide for the maintenance, comma, support and eligibility standards. Sounds like government function to me, right? Would you all agree? And so there has to be then a transition plan, not that kind of transition. This is a Republican place, not Democrats. There has to be nobody caught that. I'm losing them, Lawrence. So there has to be a transition plan to shift that burden, at least up to what is that base definition for education, back to the state of Tennessee and relieve it from the county. Wouldn't that be a great thing if your county could stop collecting so much property tax or so much sales tax because they didn't have such a burden on education? I think that'd be a good thing. I think it's constitutionally compliant. So I think that's the first steps, sir, to get to that point, is keep up what is the constitutional requirement for education and define that clearly. There was a definition process for this TISA, as I understand it, and I'm familiar with. But again, 30% of that cost is shifted to you. Put it all back on Nashville, then, I'll be honest with you, I voted for the $50,000 for the teachers. And I did that because you want the best, right? And there's some competition in that. But if you bring that funding back to the Nashville levels, and I think you don't fund $4 billion investments. You don't fund $550 million Nissan Titans. You don't do the $25 million. You start cutting those things off the budget. Our budget reduces significantly, and you focus on what the constitutional responsibility is. And that would be my approach at handling it, if that helps.
Thank you. One more question.
So we got a question that was just texted to me, and they are watching this live right now. And the question comes from Representative Jody Barrett. and it's a two-part question.
I'll go ahead and answer. Yes, you're going to win.
So here's the question. As governor, how many legislative liaisons will you hire? How will you determine the job qualifications for those jobs? And what will their role be in a Fritts administration? That's the first part of the question. Second part of the question, with a winky smiling face. And why did you endorse Jody Barrett for congressional 7th race to replace Mark Green?
So I'm going to start with that last part. If I were in this district, I'd vote for Jody. I don't like the word endorse from politicians. And Jody knows this. He's messing with me a little bit. Because I think endorsements from politicians are what career politicians do to tell you how to think. I'll just tell you that. And so you'll see a lot of these smiling politicians cheesing, and they're endorsing this, that, and the other. And I'll get to me with just a minute, and I know my friend Jody feels the same way. You know what the real endorsement Jody Barrett and Monty Fritts are seeking? Yours. It's that simple. We're seeking your endorsement. And so I think he's got the guts to stand up, and that would be the answer to that question. So Jody might have missed the first part of this. I am committed. We will no longer have legislative liaisons as Governor Fritts in the office. We will not have that because they argue against your rights. I am going to reposition them over, for some portion of them anyways, over to the Citizen Helpline, because I think the citizen... How many of y'all have called the governor's office and talked to him? Did I see a bunch of hands go up? Yeah. We need to fix that. They need to realize they work for us. And the other parts of that plan would be that on a monthly basis, those commissioners would report to the governor as to what were the concerns and questions coming in from the people. Wouldn't it be nice if your governor actually understood what the average Tennessean thought rather than just the celebrity crowd? I think it'd be a good thing. We'll make that happen. The other thing I'll say on that, and I know y'all are getting tired, I see people falling out in the back and everything. I'm just trying to wear you down. I'll wear you down long enough you'll have to vote for me. The governor has no constitutional authority to write legislation. He has no authority under the Constitution to send a bill over to a representative and say, you carry this as I've written it. He can from time to time make some suggestions, right? And I promise you, use the bully pulpit of the governor's office if I can get any of the major media to show up to hear it. To influence what is important in Tennessee. That's part of the leadership role. But I shouldn't be writing legislation. That's the legislature makes the law. The governor gets one shot at law. You all understand this, right? He gets one shot. When it comes to his desk, or she, one shot. Now, if that were Janice Boland, I'd be all for that. But he gets one shot. He can sign it into law. He can veto it and send back reasons why, right? Or he can let it lay for 10 days, not counting Sunday, and it becomes law. That's the governor's interface with legislation, and it needs to be limited to that. And that was designed by our founders to empower you, because there weren't 7 million plus people in Tennessee when our Constitution was written in 1796, but it was still a long, big state. You have a much better chance to talk to Todd Warner or Monty Fritts in their district to influence how the legislation goes, or you should have, than what you do with the governor, right? And I'm going to try to remedy that some with the helpline, but Governor Fritts ain't going to write no bills.
Good job. One more question? I have one question, and a mic off? We turn it off? Got it? Okay. Maybe an odd question, but I'm curious about right to carry arms everywhere except for schools. And thank you. My question is, there's signs up that says this is a gun-free zone. Well, somebody that's wanting to do something stupid ain't going to look at that sign or not even read it. Maybe they can't even read, but I go to every ball game at my high school and middle school, and there's maybe 1 or 2 police officers there. If somebody wanted to get stupid, how many people could they save? Two police officers when you could have a militia sitting in the crowd. I don't know if that's ever been discussed or brought up or thought about, but I think about it every time I go to a ball game, because our country's getting infiltrated with people that want to hurt us.
Yeah, I agree with you, brother. And I have a bill this year, rather comprehensive. I had it last year, and I have a really good senator co-sponsoring that bill with me, or carrying it on the Senate side, Joey Hensley. He's a great guy. And he knew that he had some, I think it was going to judiciary, and he knew there was going to be some problems in there. And so we held it back until this year to try to get it through. He hadn't been able to work it enough to be able to get passed. And y'all need to pray for that. Because I'm telling you, there's some of these people hate your gun rights. But that bill, what it does, a couple things that will be really controversial. They shouldn't be. They're constitutional. First, campus carry on our college campuses. And it deals with that. Your 18-year-old does not forfeit his or her rights to defend themselves when they go to the University of Tennessee or University of Memphis. We need to end that, stop that. At our high schools and at our schools, this whole prohibition, complete prohibition against firearms, we're setting up vulnerabilities. I'm all for having school resource officers. Todd and I both voted to increase the SROs. We've allowed such a culture to develop that the teacher carry thing that was offered was so laden with stuff that I don't think there'll ever be a teacher in Tennessee carry as a result of it. I voted for it, but you just knew it was so laden with stuff it was never going to pass. And that's an unfortunate thing. I don't want to force any teacher to carry, and I don't want
the students themselves carrying firearms in school. But I will tell you this. When I graduated high school in 82, there was a lot of people who had a 22 or a shotgun in the back window of their car or their truck or whatever. And we weren't, the bad things that are happening today weren't happening then. I think the Second Amendment is absolute. And I think we need to get that bill that Fritts has got sponsored through next year, because it's going to address some of those things. And so I'm committed to do that. But here's the most important thing I'll say tonight. Was that the last question, Lawrence?
Yes, sir.
Our country is in trouble. Our state is in trouble. My first point, the Bible says without vision the people perish. My first version of, or first instance of vision in this would be, we need a repentance in Tennessee. It's the reason I did the prayer resolution in 2024 and again in 2025. If you're not a Christian and that you don't understand that, I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just saying our founders were creationists in their worldview. Our Article 1, Section 3 of the Tennessee Constitution gives you a right to worship Almighty God, capital A, capital G. And when I say that is specific and restrictive, it is. And so, again, black robe people don't get to redefine marriage, and they don't get to rewrite the Constitution because they think differently. But until we have a move of citizens of great repentance in Tennessee and revival, because repentance has to occur before revival, we're going to continue to have crazy people that do crazy things, demonic things. It is a demonic thing to go into a covenant school and kill 3 kids and 3 adults. It is past criminal, it's demonic. And I will tell you this, I do think that we've not gone far enough to hold fully accountable those people that encourage perhaps some of the demonic possession of souls. And I know this may be way too far for some of y'all, but I'm going to go ahead and go there. If you're a doctor and you're willing to do a surgery on a human being to convert them from hen to rooster, or you're willing to give them medication when they're a little child, you ought to be eligible for the death penalty. There was a time when we Americans said that the Germans that did that should be put to death. What has happened to us? That we're okay with that. And friends, those of y'all that are church members, that's on us. We're the light of the world. The lost world is living in darkness. They're waiting for us to point them toward the lordship of Christ. And until we really take up that full measure responsibility, we're still going to deal with lots of the things we're dealing with now. And that sounds defeatist. It's not. There's great hope in that. It's the only hope, because if your hope is in a person, me, or Todd, or Bubba, or Susie, you're in trouble. Our hope is in the Lord. And your confidence then has to be in people that will follow the Lord. So I will tell you this too, we're going to try to push harder toward repentance and revival in Tennessee as a Fritts. I'm sure I'll catch lots of flack about that, especially when I slip and say a word I shouldn't say in front of kids. I'm going to get so worn out going home by my wife. But again, I love you all. I'm going to stop now. I'll talk you to death. Thank you for letting me be here tonight.
All right, thank you, everyone. I thought we would come down here, but I'm sitting here looking. I don't think we got enough room, so if we'll meet out in the foyer, and we'll go ahead and we'll clear out. Thank you for everything coming tonight, and look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Have a good night.
Well done, Lawrence.